The sky split open with thunder that cracked like a rifle shot as Josie Bell trudged along the storm-lashed trail, every step heavier than the last. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. April of 1876 had drenched the Wyoming territory, turning the usual dust into a sucking bog that tried to steal her boots at every step. She'd been on foot 3 days now, ever since bandits had torn apart the stagecoach, leaving her stranded with nothing but the damp dress on her back, and a letter promising her a teaching post in Redemption Creek, a town that seemed farther with every mile. Rain stung her cheeks, blending with tears she stubbornly refused to admit. Her once tidy blonde hair hung in wet ropes plastered to her face. At just 22, Josie had weathered plenty of loss her parents to influenza, their Boston home, to unpaid debts. But nothing matched this lonely fight against a wilderness that seemed bent on breaking her. The world tilted. Sky and mud traded places, and her weary legs finally gave up. Josie pitched forward, face in the muck, the taste of earth in her mouth as her senses slipped away. In the haze of fading awareness, she thought she heard hooves, but surely it was only thunder, until strong arms rolled her over. Through rain-blurred vision, she glimpsed the silhouette of a cowboy wide-brimmed hat shadowing his face. The last thing she knew was being lifted against a broad chest before blackness swallowed her whole. "You're safe now, miss. You'll never be alone again." A deep voice rumbled words that followed her into unconsciousness. When awareness returned, it wasn't the sting of cold she felt, but warmth, gentle, steady, wrapping her like a quilt. Josie blinked to rough-hewn beams above the crackle of fire close by. She was in a bed, clean sheets, dressed in an oversized man's shirt that swallowed her frame. Panic shot through her. She bolted upright, instantly regretting it as her head spun. "Easy there," came a calm but firm voice from across the room. "You're safe, but you've got to rest." Her eyes fixed on the man by the hearth. Tall, broad-shouldered, his skin weathered by sun and years of hard riding. Dark brown hair, green eyes, cautious, yet kind. Not handsome in a polished Boston way, but striking all the same. Where am I?" her voice rasped. "My place," he said, pouring water into a tin cup. 15 miles outside Redemption Creek. Name's Rafe Harlan." He offered the cup. "And you are Miss Josie Bell," she answered, her hand trembling as she took the water, suddenly aware of her state of dress. A faint smile tugged at his mouth. "Don't fret. Pearl Fenwick, my neighbor, helped you get cleaned up. Your clothes are drying by the fire." "How long have I been here?" she asked softly. "Since yesterday afternoon." "You had a bad fever." Memories crashed back, the endless walking, the storm, the mud. "I remember falling." "I came across you on the trail," he said, leaning forward, elbows on his knees. "Almost rode on, thought you were a bundle of rags till my horse spooked." His eyes narrowed. "What were you doing out there alone, Miss Bell?" Years of Boston manners told her not to trust strangers, but this man had saved her life. Something in his steady gaze told her he meant no harm. "I was headed to Redemption Creek. I'm to be the school teacher." His brows lifted. "So you're the one the town's been waiting on. The coach was robbed 3 days back," she explained. "Driver killed, the others scattered. I figured the town couldn't be too far." Rafe's jaw tightened. "Damn road agent's been thick this spring. You're lucky you made it this far." "I owe that to you," she whispered. Silence filled the cabin, broken only by the fire's pop. Josie looked around a sparse but tidy home. A few books on a shelf, a guitar in the corner, a quilt finer than she expected in a rancher's cabin. "You live here alone?" she asked, then flushed at her own boldness. "Just me and my hands. They've got quarters out by the barn." He turned to the stove where stew simmered. "You must be hungry." Her stomach growled before she could answer, and his laugh, rich and warm, filled the space. For the first time since the robbery, she felt something besides fear. "I'll need to let the council know you're safe," Rafe said, ladling stew into a bowl. "They'll be glad their teacher finally arrived." Josie clutched the blanket around her shoulders. "How soon can I get to town?" "You'll stay here till you're stronger," he replied, handing her the bowl. As their fingers brushed, a spark jolted between them. "Thank you, Mr. Harlan," she murmured, cheeks hot. "Rafe," he corrected gently. "And you're no burden." "Didn't I promise you wouldn't be alone anymore?" She froze, spoon halfway to her lips. "So that was real, what you said when you found me." A flicker of embarrassment crossed his face. "Thought you were unconscious." "I was mostly," she admitted. "But I heard enough. It was comforting." Their eyes held for a beat longer than proper firelight flickering between them. Their eyes locked again, neither willing to turn away. For a heartbeat, the silence between Josie Bell and Rafe Harlan carried something deeper than words, two souls, who knew the weight of loneliness too well. Rafe was the first to break it, standing abruptly. "Eat your stew before it chills. I've got to see to the horses." He snatched his hat from its peg and stepped out into the dimming light, leaving Josie with a bowl of stew, richer than anything she could remember, and a flutter in her chest that had little to do with fever. By dawn, the storm had passed. Sunlight poured through the small cabin window, the smell of coffee drifting on the air. Josie found her own dress, clean, stiff from drying, folded neatly by the bed. Once dressed, she stepped outside. The sight left her breathless. Rafe's spread stretched across a wide valley, rolling hills, folding into distant mountains, a creek winding through pastures dotted with cattle. Morning light set the dew-silvered grass ablaze. Mornin' Rafe called from near the corral, where a young man worked a fiery chestnut mare. "Better than I've slept in weeks," Josie admitted, walking toward him. "Your land is beautiful." Pride softened his features. "Been in the family near 15 years. My father, Elias Boone, claimed it when I was just a boy. 2,000 acres from the creek clear to those hills. You built all this, he started it. I finished after he passed 5 years back." His tone hinted at more, but Josie didn't pry. The young hand called out, "Boss thinks she's ready for a saddle." "That's Red Elk," Rafe explained. "Best with horses I've ever seen. Came up from Mexico 3 years ago." Josie watched, impressed, as Red Elk soothed the mare with steady hands. "Got about a dozen men," Rafe added. "Hard workers, though a couple are rough around the edges." He led her toward a small garden where an older woman stooped among vegetables. "This here's Pearl Fenwick. She tended you." Pearl straightened apron dusty. "Good to see you standin', miss. Had us worried." "Thank you," Josie said sincerely. Pearl chuckled. "Don't thank me. It was Rafe who sat at your bedside all night, laying cool cloths on your fever till I came." Rafe shifted uneasily. "Pearl makes the best biscuits in the territory," he said quickly. "Only 'cause this one would live on jerky and coffee otherwise." Pearl teased affection in her eyes. "Come along. Miss Bell, breakfast's ready." Over biscuits, eggs, and ham, Josie learned about Redemption Creek. Just 10 years old, the town had sprung from a silver mine now near 500 souls. A schoolhouse stood, but keeping a teacher had been near impossible. "Last one quit when the miners' boys put a rattler in his desk," Rafe said, pouring coffee. "One before him married a widow near Cheyenne." "And now me," Josie mused. "Will they still want me? I'm weeks late." "They'll be glad you came at all," Pearl assured her. "Town's desperate for someone to teach the young'uns." After breakfast, Rafe showed Josie the ranch, the barn, bunkhouse, smokehouse, all of it bustling with life. "Do you miss Boston?" he asked as they paused by the creek. She thought carefully. I miss libraries, theater hot baths whenever I wanted them. A wry smile touched her lips. But it stopped feeling like home after my parents, Henry Quinn and Abigail May, passed. I'm sorry, Rafe said quietly. It's been 3 years. I worked as a governess for a wealthy family. But when they left for Europe, I had nothing left. Her gaze lifted to his. When I saw the notice for a teacher in Wyoming, it felt like a chance to begin again. Takes grit, he said, or desperation. Sometimes that's the same thing. They walked on sharing stories. Rafe told of growing up here riding before he could walk, building the herd with his father. Josie spoke of her Boston childhood, her father's bookshop where she fell in love with words, her mother's insistence on proper schooling. She would have been horrified knowing I ended up in the West. Josie laughed. To her, anything west of Philadelphia was wilderness. She wouldn't be wrong. Rafe grinned. We've got our share of troublemakers, like the men who robbed your coach. His smile faded. Marshall Granger thinks it's a gang led by Silas Kane, former Confederate turned outlaw. Have they caught any? Rafe shook his head grimly. They're slippery. Strike fast, then vanish into the back country. Ghosts with guns. They had circled back to the main house when Josie Bell caught sight of herself in a water barrel. Mud-streaked cheeks, tangled hair tied back with the ribbon Pearl Fenwick had given her, she winced at the reflection. I must look a fright, she muttered, trying to tame her hair. Rafe Harlan's gaze lingered steady and unflinching. You look just fine, Miss Bell. Something in his tone made her glance up. Their eyes met, and for a heartbeat she forgot her disheveled state, forgot propriety, forgot everything but the warmth flickering in his green eyes. The moment shattered with the pounding of hooves. Rafe turned, hand drifting to his revolver, in a motion so natural Josie realized it was instinct, not thought. A rider pulled up his horse, lathered with sweat. Rafe the man called. Word from town. Silas Kane's gang struck the supply wagon out of Cheyenne. Marshall Granger is calling a meeting. Rafe's jaw clenched. Any casualties? Drivers hurt but alive. They took it all ammunition supplies, payroll for the mine. Damn, Rafe muttered, then glanced at Josie contrite. Beg pardon, Miss Bell. I'll saddle shadow, the ranch hand offered. No need Wade Fletcher, I'll see to it. Rafe turned back to Josie. I've got to ride into town, part of the council. But maybe this is a chance to introduce you to Mayor Virgil Stowe and the school board. Think you're up for it? Her heart leapt at the thought of finally reaching her post, though a strange reluctance tugged at her. Yes, she said with more confidence than she felt. I owe it to them and to myself. I'll have Red Elk saddle a gentle mare for you. Can you ride? I can, she said, recalling Boston lessons in the public garden. Good. Daisy's steady. She'll see you safe. An hour later, they were side by side, the trail rolling out beneath them. Josie wore the one good dress she had left from the robbery hair pinned as best Pearl could manage. Before she mounted, Pearl had pressed a small bundle into her hand. Just a few necessities. Dear till you're settled. The ride took a little over an hour. Along the way, Rafe pointed out creeks, fence lines, and landmarks, weaving the land's story into hers. When they crested a ridge, Redemption Creek spread wide before them. Bigger than Josie had imagined, a main street with sturdy wooden buildings, some with real glass windows. A church steeple rose proudly, and beside it stood the schoolhouse, whitewashed with a bell tower perched above. Well, Rafe asked, studying her face. It's more than I pictured, she admitted. The letters made it sound smaller. We're growing fast, he said with pride. Mine's been good, and if the railroad keeps its promise, we'll have a spur line here by next year. They rode down drawing stairs as they entered town, the rancher folks knew with a woman no one had seen before. Rafe hitched the horses outside town hall and the sheriff's office, then helped Josie down. His hands lingered a heartbeat longer at her waist. "Ready?" he asked low. She straightened her spine, chin high. "Yes." Inside town hall buzzed with ranchers, miners, shopkeepers, dust sweat, and sharp voices filling the air. Conversation stilled the moment Rafe entered with Josie on his arm. Rafe Harlan boomed, a portly man with a sweeping mustache. "And who's this Mayor Stowe?" Rafe said. "Allow me to present Miss Josie Bell, our new school teacher." A murmur rippled through the crowd. The mayor's brows shot up. "The teacher, Lord, above we thought you were lost for good, Miss Bell." "Her coach was ambushed," Rafe explained. "She walked for days. I found her on my land yesterday." The mayor took her hand warmly. "My dear girl, what an ordeal." "Are you well?" "I am now," she answered softly. "Thanks to Mr. Harlan's kindness." "Well, well," said a sharp-eyed woman at his side. "I'm Ruth Carver, the mayor's wife. We've been dreadfully anxious about the school." "Yes, indeed," Stowe chimed in. "Term should have started 2 weeks back. Parents are restless. I'm ready to begin at once," Josie assured them. "Though I lost nearly everything in the robbery, my books, my materials." Ruth's expression softened. "The last teacher left a few things behind, and I'm sure we can gather the rest." "Thank you," Josie said earnestly. Rafe cut in. "And where will she be staying? Is the teacher's cottage ready?" The couple exchanged uneasy looks. Ruth cleared her throat delicately. "There is a small complication. When Miss Bell did not arrive, we let Doc Whitlock house his new nurse there. Just temporarily, you understand. Where exactly is she supposed to stay?" Rafe Harlan's voice cut through the hall hard enough to make Josie Bell's pulse quicken. "We could put her in the boarding house," suggested Mayor Virgil Stowe. "It's full up with miners from the new shaft," Ruth Carver countered, shaking her head. "The hotel, then." Rafe snorted. "On a teacher's wages? That's no solution." Josie shifted uncomfortably. They were debating her future, as if she weren't standing right there. "Perhaps I could speak to this nurse," she offered quietly. "We might share the cottage until something else is arranged." Ruth pursed her lips. "That would be Ellie June Doc's sister. She's particular. I doubt she'd welcome sharing quarters. Then she'll remain at my ranch," Rafe said firmly. "Pearl Fenwick is there as chaperone, and it'll be temporary." Josie's eyes widened. The offer was bold, improper even, but more generous than she could have hoped. "That's mighty kind of you, Harlan," Virgil said with clear relief. "Just till we sort things out." The meeting turned back to business, Silas Kane's raid on the supply train, but Josie only half heard. Her thoughts tangled on what it would mean to keep living under Rafe's roof. Afterward, Rafe introduced her to the school board, Doc Whitlock Ezekiel North, the banker, and Clara Mita, the formidable widow who ran the mercantile. "There are 26 children enrolled," Clara told her briskly. "From 6 to 16. Some can't write their own names. Others are ahead of the lot. I'll assess each child," Josie promised, "and set lessons to fit them." "Can you start Monday?" Doc asked. "That gives you 3 days," Ezekiel added. Josie forced a steady nod. "Yes. Of course." "Excellent." Ezekiel clapped. "Your contract will be ready tomorrow. $40 a month, cottage included once it's open." It wasn't wealth, but more than she'd ever earned back east. "Thank you," she said. "I'll do my best for your town." When the meeting closed, Rafe suggested, "Come see the schoolhouse before we head back." They walked Main Street side by side. Josie keenly aware of curious stares. "They're watching," she murmured. "Small town," Rafe said with a crooked smile. "New faces draw eyes. Especially a pretty one." Her cheeks warmed. "Is that all? Maybe not. Being seen with me? Some won't like it." "Why's that?" she asked. "Prefer the open range to town halls." He shrugged. And I've butted heads with a few folks who think they run this place." Before she could ask more, they reached the schoolhouse. Rafe unlocked the door. Inside, rows of wooden desks faced a teacher's platform and a blackboard. A pot-bellied stove sat in the corner bookshelves, bare and waiting. Josie drifted down the rows, fingertips brushing the desks, her heart beating with excitement. This was her calling. "It's perfect," she breathed. "Like most worthwhile things," Rafe said quietly, watching her. "It just needs tending." Their eyes caught heat rising between them, until Josie looked away, flustered. "We should head back. I don't want to overstay Pearl's kindness." "She doesn't mind," Rafe assured. "Gets lonely with just me and the hands around." As they retrieved their horses, shouts carried from the saloon. A group of rough men spilled into the street, laughter sharp and mean. One swaggered toward them. "Well, now look at you," the man sneered. "Bit fancy for a ranch hand's girl, ain't she?" Rafe stiffened. "Move along, Clyde Webb. You're drunk." Clyde's grin was stained and ugly. "Just being friendly." His eyes raked over Josie, making her stomach turn. "Lady, if you want better company than this half-breed." He never finished. Rafe had him by the collar, voice low as a growl. "Apologize. To the lady." Clyde's friends bristled, but Rafe's hand slid to his Colt. "Don't." Clyde wilted. "Sorry, ma'am." Rafe shoved him back. "Get sobered up. You shame yourself." The men slunk away, muttering. Josie sat frozen, reeling from the venom in Clyde's words. "I'm sorry you had to hear that," Rafe said stiffly, lifting her into the saddle. "Some men never learned respect." "Rafe," she began, hesitant. "That name he called you?" His jaw tightened. "My mother was Shoshone Rafe," Harlan said flatly. "Does that trouble you, Miss Bell?" There was a challenge in his tone, as though he braced for scorn. Josie Bell held his gaze without flinching. "No," she answered firmly. "It doesn't trouble me one bit." Some of the tension left his face, though caution lingered in his eyes. "We'd best get back before dark." The ride home carried more silence than their trip into town. Josie's thoughts spun with everything she'd learned about Redemption Creek, about her post, and about the man beside her. She stole glances at his profile, seeing him in a new light. Proud Shoshone lines etched in his cheekbones and jaw. She now understood the wary respect townsfolk showed him, his preference for the ranch over town politics, and the venom behind Clyde Webb's insult. What she couldn't make sense of was the pull she felt toward him, or how her pulse had thundered when he'd defended her. As they neared the ranch, the sun melted across the land in gold and copper. Rafe drew shadow to a stop on a ridge, and Josie reined in beside him. "It's beautiful," she whispered, taking in the spread below pastures dotted with cattle smoke curling from the cabin chimney. "This land runs in my blood," Rafe said quietly. "My father Elias Boone saw what it could be when others called it worthless. My mother's people knew its seasons long before white men came. I belong here in a way I've never belonged anywhere else." Josie realized he was giving her more than a view, he was opening a door into his soul. "Thank you," she said softly. Their eyes met, and something shifted, something deeper than before. A shout from the ranch yard shattered the moment. One of the men waved frantically toward the west pasture. Smoke rose against the evening sky. Fire. Rafe snapped, spurring Shadow hard. "Stay put," he barked, but Josie couldn't. She followed at a slower pace, her heart pounding. By the time she reached the yard, chaos had taken hold. Men shouted, hauling buckets and tools. Pearl Fenwick stood on the porch, worry etched deep. "What's happening?" Josie cried, stumbling down. "West pasture's burning," Pearl answered grimly. "Fence cut. Grass lit on purpose." "On purpose," Josie gasped. Pearl's look was hard. "Rafe's got enemies." For hours, Josie did what she could, filling canteens, setting out food, gathering bandages. It was well past midnight when the men returned, smoke-stained and worn, but alive. "We held it," Rafe reported, taking a steaming cup from Pearl. "Lost about 20 acres and some fencing. No cattle, no buildings." "Thank the Lord," Pearl murmured. "Found whiskey bottles. Hoofprints back toward town," Rafe added, voice sharp. "Webb and his pals, most likely." "The one who insulted you?" Josie asked quietly. Rafe nodded. "He rides for Hank Doyle. They've been trying to shove me off this land for years. But why your ranch is thriving. That's why," Rafe muttered, dragging a hand over his face. "Doyle wants my water. And some men can't stand the thought of someone like me, holding ground they covet." "Someone like you," Josie echoed. "A half-breed," he said bluntly. "Men like Doyle think this land belongs only to real Americans." Bitterness cut through every word. "That's vile," Josie burst out, heat rising in her chest. "Your father broke this land into pasture. And your mother's people have deeper roots than any of them." Surprise flickered in Rafe's eyes. Surprise, and something softer. "Not many see it that way." "They're wrong," she said with conviction. A weary smile curved his mouth. "You're something else, Miss Bell." "Josie," she corrected impulsively. "After all we've been through, you can call me Josie." He repeated her name slowly as though tasting it. "Josie. Then you must call me Rafe," he added, voice low. Their eyes met again, and despite the soot on his skin and the smoke clinging to his clothes, she had never seen a man more striking. The realization startled her with its intensity. "You should rest," she whispered, breaking the spell. He nodded, drained. "We all should. Thank you for everything tonight." Later in the small room Pearl had prepared, Josie lay awake, knowing Rafe was bedding down in the bunkhouse for propriety's sake. Just days ago she'd been a lost traveler. Now she was a schoolteacher, a guest under his roof, and something else she could barely name. Whatever was growing between them, it felt truer than anything she had ever known back east. The next 3 days blurred past. Josie spent mornings in town readying the schoolhouse and meeting parents, afternoons back at the ranch where she was beginning to feel at home. Rafe kept busy repairing fences and burned pasture, but at meals and in quiet evenings their paths crossed. Each meeting deepened her fascination. She discovered he read everything Shakespeare Geology Histories volumes lined the cabin shelves, evidence of a restless, curious mind. He played the guitar with an ease that made the cabin walls hum each note, carrying a lonesome beauty that seemed born from the plains themselves. His voice carried old Shoshone words when he sang, and he spoke of the land like it was family, knowing every plant's name, every use. And to Josie's quiet surprise, Rafe Harlan seemed just as captivated by her. He asked her thoughts on teaching, listened to stories of Boston with genuine interest, and wanted her views on books on politics, on anything she cared to share. Pearl Fenwick watched their growing closeness with eyes that missed nothing, though she held her tongue. Sometimes, though, Josie caught the older woman smothering a smile whenever she and Rafe lost themselves in conversation. That Sunday afternoon, the day before her first class, Rafe found Josie Bell sitting by the creek with her lesson plans. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, holding 2 steaming cups. "Please," she said, smiling as she took one gratefully. He lowered himself beside her on the grass, leaving a respectful space. "Ready for tomorrow?" "As ready as I can be," she sighed. "Truth is, I'm nervous. These children have been taught so unevenly, some barely know their letters." "You'll do just fine," Rafe assured her. "You've got a way of making things clear. That matters more than fancy theories." Her brows lifted. "And how would you know that—" A hint of color touched his face. "I heard you working with Red Elk's boy. Patience like that is rare." She hadn't realized he'd been listening. Her voice softened. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They sat for a time in companionable silence, watching sunlight play on the rippling water. At length, Rafe said, "Spoke to Virgil Stowe yesterday. The nurse is leaving the teacher's cottage next week. Her fiancé's coming in from Denver." Josie's chest tightened with conflicting feelings, relief at having a place of her own, yet an unexpected reluctance to leave the ranch. "That's good news." "Yeah," he said, though his tone didn't match the word. "You'll be properly settled then." She glanced at him, then whispered, "Rafe, I need to thank you for finding me, for caring for me, for giving me shelter. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." His gaze locked on hers, steady and raw. "I'm just glad I did." Her pulse quickened. Acting on impulse, she set her hand over his where it lay in the grass. He turned his palm, weaving his fingers through hers, his eyes holding a flicker of hope and something more. "Josie," he began, voice low, when a shout rang from the yard. Red Elk was waving urgently. With clear reluctance, Rafe rose. "I'd better see what's wrong." "Of course," she said, hiding her disappointment. He took 2 steps, then turned back. "Josie." "Yes. Will you have supper with me tonight, just the 2 of us? I need to talk with you private." Her breath caught. "I'd like that very much." His smile lit his face, unguarded and warm. "I'll see to it." That evening, Pearl served them on Rafe's best dishes, then slipped away with a knowing look. Wildflowers stood in a small jar on the table, a single lantern casting gold between them. "This is lovely," Josie said, touched by his care. "Not much compared to a Boston dining hall," he said, half embarrassed. "Better?" she answered softly. "Because it's yours." They ate, they talked, but beneath every word was a current of expectation stronger than either could deny. When the meal ended, Rafe brought out a bottle of whiskey. "Care for one?" She hesitated, then nodded. "Just a little." He poured 2 small glasses, their fingers brushing, as he handed hers over. Instead of returning to his chair, he drew close, eyes shadowed by the lantern light. "Josie," he began, swirling the amber in his glass. "I need to be straight with you." "I wouldn't want it any other way," she said, though her heart was pounding. "These last days with you here." He paused, searching for words. "I've never met anyone like you. You're strong, you're smart, and you see folks for who they truly are. Not many can do that." Her throat tightened. "Rafe, please, let me finish." He set down his glass and clasped her hand between both of his. "I know it's sudden. You've just arrived, you're starting your post, and you barely know me, but I can't let you move into town without telling you the truth." Her voice trembled. "And what truth is that?" His green eyes burned steady into hers. "I'm falling in love with you, Josie Bell. I think I started the moment I lifted you out of that mud." Joy rose in her like fire, catching dry grass, fierce and unstoppable. "I feel it too," she whispered. "It makes no sense, we come from such different worlds, but when I'm with you, everything feels right." Rafe's face lit with a boyish hope. "You mean it?" "Yes," Josie Bell said softly. "I do." He brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles with a reverence that sent a shiver through her. "I don't want to push you," he murmured. "You need to build your place in town first, earn their trust as a teacher. Folks might wag tongues if they see you tied to me too soon." Josie understood. In Redemption Creek, a school marm had to be spotless in reputation, and though Rafe Harlan was respected as a rancher, whispers about his Shoshone blood and his feud with the Harrington clan lingered. "I don't give a damn what people think," she said firmly, threading her fingers through his. "But you're right. I need to stand on my own first. This isn't goodbye, Rafe. It's just a pause. Relief broke across his face. I can wait, he promised, and I'll keep it quiet till you're ready. Not too patient, I hope, she teased. His grin came quick and unguarded, softening his usually serious features. Just patient enough. He drew her gently to her feet, lantern light painting them both in flickering gold. His hand brushed her cheek with the lightness of a prayer. May I kiss you, Josie? She answered by leaning in. Their lips met gentle at first, then hungrier as the loneliness of years and the thrill of finding each other poured out. His arms closed around her, her hands pressed into his shoulders, and the world shrank to just the two of them. When they parted, breathless, he pressed his forehead to hers. I've wanted that since you were strong enough to scold me for handing you water too fast. He chuckled low. She laughed, remembering her own sharpness. And I've wanted it since I saw you calm that wild horse with nothing but patience and a steady voice. He kissed her again, quick and sure, then stepped back reluctantly. I'd better see you to your room before Pearl Fenwick comes hunting for us. Tomorrow's a big day. Tomorrow, she echoed, though part of her wanted to stay in his arms till dawn. At her doorway, he gave her a final kiss, sweet, promising more to come. Good night, Josie. Sleep well. Good night, Rafe. As she readied for bed, her thoughts spun. She had crossed the country for a fresh start, never imagining she'd find not just work, but a man who stirred her heart so deeply. Whatever lay ahead, she felt braver than she had in years. The next morning broke bright over Redemption Creek. After a quick breakfast where Rafe kept his distance despite the heat in his eyes, Josie mounted Daisy the mare he'd insisted she keep until she had one of her own. 24 children filled the schoolhouse, from shy 6-year-olds to lanky teenagers trying to look uninterested. Parents lingered in the back, judging her as much as their children. With her spine straight, Josie rang the bell. Good morning, she said clearly. I'm Miss Bell, and I'm honored to be your teacher. From that moment, nerves vanished beneath the work. The hours flew. By noon, she dismissed the younger ones and kept the older students behind. Not all went smoothly. Jessie Doyle, only 13, but already hardened, tested her patience. Ellie June. Doc. Whitlock's daughter took delight in correcting her Latin, and poor little Crow Red Elk's boy sat frozen until she coaxed him gently into answering. But as the last child left that evening, Josie felt deep satisfaction. This was where she belonged. Virgil Stowe and Clara Mita stopped in. You have a natural authority, Virgil said. Even young Jessie Doyle seemed to listen, and he's run off 2 teachers already. He's sharp, Josie replied. He just needs to be challenged. They confirmed the teacher's cottage would be ready by Saturday. Josie smiled and thanked them, hiding her mixed feelings about leaving Rafe's ranch. To her surprise, Rafe was waiting outside, leaning casual against the hitching rail. How was your first day? He asked, his smile warming her tired bones. Wonderful. Exhausting. Terrifying. All of it, she laughed. He helped her mount Daisy, his hands steady at her waist. I'm proud of you. Her heart soared at the simple words. Thank you for coming, but won't people talk? He shrugged. Let 'em. I'm just a concerned citizen checking on our new school marm. Besides, I had business in town. They rode back side by side, their talk flowing easy. Her lessons the children, the books she longed to add to the sparse shelves. Rafe listened with quiet attention, his knowledge of the families helping her understand the town's tangled web. And so a rhythm formed Josie, riding to town each morning, teaching till afternoon, then meeting Rafe on the road home. Evenings soon found Josie Bell balancing lesson plans with suppers, shared beside Pearl Fenwick and the ranch hands, and then slipping away for precious stolen minutes with Rafe Harlan. Walks by the creek under starlight, whispered talks on the porch, and kisses that grew deeper with every passing night became their secret rhythm. One evening after supper, Rafe suggested a ride to his favorite place, a high meadow that looked out over the valley. The breeze carried the scent of wild flowers, and the sky burned red and gold as the sun went down. They spread a blanket on the grass, sitting so close their shoulders touched. "I'll miss this," Josie murmured, leaning into him. "I'll miss you," Rafe replied, sliding an arm around her waist. "But I'll ride into town more often. And maybe the schoolmarm could bring her pupils out here for educational purposes, a lesson or two about ranch life." Josie smiled at his sly tone. "That's a fine idea, Mr. Harlan. My students would learn plenty from seeing real ranch work, and their teacher might gain from a few more writing lessons." Her voice trembled on the last words. She turned toward him, suddenly serious. "Rafe, what happens now between us?" His green eyes never wavered. "That depends on what you want. I want you," she said truthfully. "But I also want to be the teacher this town needs. Those children deserve every bit of me." "You can be both," he said with quiet conviction. He took her hands in his. "Josie, I meant every word the other night. I'm not just falling for you, I love you. I know it's sudden, but sometimes the heart knows what it wants." Her chest tightened with joy. "I love you too," she whispered. "Fast or not, it feels right." He kissed her, pouring his soul into the embrace, and she answered with the same fire arms winding around his neck as though she would never let go. When they broke apart, breathless, Rafe pressed his forehead to hers. "Marry me," he said suddenly. She pulled back in shock. "What? Marry me?" He repeated, his voice fierce. "Not tomorrow, not before you're ready. But soon. Be my wife, Josie. Share my ranch, my life, my future." Her heart soared even as her practical side faltered. "Rafe, the town barely knows me. Some will disapprove. I don't give a damn," he cut in. "I've lived my life between two worlds, never fully accepted in either. With you, I finally feel whole." He tightened his hold on her hands. "Unless you fear what being my wife would mean." She understood his heritage, the whispers. She lifted her chin. "Never that. I love you as you are. I only fear making things harder for you." Rafe let out a disbelieving laugh. "Harder, Josie, you've brought me light where I thought there'd only be darkness. Nothing about loving you is hard." Tears pricked her eyes. "Yes," she said thickly. "Yes, I'll marry you." His grin split wide and radiant. He kissed her again, tender and certain. Then he reached into his pocket, drawing out a small ring. "I've carried this for days," he confessed. In his palm lay a simple gold band with a sapphire that gleamed like a captured star. It was my mother's. My father gave it to her when everyone said their marriage would never last. But they loved each other till the end. Josie's breath caught as he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "I'll cherish it always." They lingered in that meadow till stars dotted the sky, talking of dreams, plans, and the life ahead. Back at the ranch, Pearl Fenwick wept tears of joy when they shared the news, confessing she'd been praying for just such an ending. The next day, Josie moved into the teacher's cottage, a tidy 2-room house behind the school. Rafe helped carry her things, and Pearl packed food enough to start her off. At her doorstep with neighbors about propriety, forced restraint. But his hands enclosed hers, steady and strong. "I'll be at Sunday service," he promised. "Afterward, we'll tell Virgil Stowe and the school board, if you're ready." Her stomach fluttered, but she nodded. "I'm ready." 2 months, he suggested softly. "Let the town see you as their teacher. Then we wed." Her smile bloomed through happy tears. "November will be perfect." With one last look that said all the words he couldn't in public, Rafe rode away, leaving Josie breathless with hope. Sunday morning came, and Josie walked into Redemption Creek's little whitewashed church in her best blue gown. Eyes followed her, curious and assessing, as she slipped into a pew. Reverend Latham, a warm man with silver hair and a booming voice, greeted her kindly, introducing her to parishioners and pointing out her students in their Sunday best. When Rafe entered a few minutes later, tall and commanding, a ripple went through the congregation. Josie Bell soon realized that though Rafe Harlan held standing as both a prosperous rancher and a seat on the town council, his boots rarely crossed the church threshold. When he did appear like this Sunday, he only gave a polite nod to those nearby before slipping into a bench near the back. His eyes met hers briefly, steady and grounding, before fixing on Reverend Latham as the sermon began. Josie hardly heard the words about faith and perseverance. Her mind wrestled with the weight of what they planned to announce afterward. The sapphire ring, his mother's now hers, rested against her skin, hidden on a chain beneath her collar, until the proper moment came. When the final hymn ended and folks spilled onto the steps in clusters of chatter, Rafe moved to her side, his presence like a shield. "Ready?" he asked quietly. Josie drew courage from his steady gaze and nodded. Together they walked toward Virgil Stowe, who was speaking with Doc Whitlock and Clara Mita near the gate. Mayor Stowe Rafe said, formal as a courtroom, "Might we have a word with you and the rest of the board concerning Miss Bell?" The mayor's brows arched, but he agreed at once. "Of course, Harlan. Let's step inside for privacy." In Reverend Latham's plain office, Rafe took Josie's hand, a gesture that told their story before words left his mouth. "Mayor Stowe, Doc Whitlock, Mrs. Mita," he said, voice calm but sure. "I've asked Miss Bell to be my wife, and she has honored me by saying yes." A hush fell before Virgil cleared his throat. "Well, now that is unexpected. But congratulations to you both." Clara Mita's keen eyes flicked between them. "Sudden, wouldn't you say?" Josie lifted her chin. "Sometimes the heart knows the truth sooner than the mind. Rafe and I found something in each other neither expected here in Redemption Creek." Doc Whitlock leaned forward. "But Miss Bell, you've only just begun teaching. I am committed to my school," Josie assured him. "We've set our wedding for November. That gives me time to prove myself in the classroom." Virgil hesitated. "There is the matter of propriety." "A married teacher, not unheard of," Clara cut in briskly. "My cousin teaches in Denver. She's married and well-respected." She eyed Josie. "Will you keep to the teacher's cottage?" Rafe answered before Josie could. "No. My wife will live with me at the ranch. I'll see to her daily travel no matter the weather." The three exchanged loaded glances, weighing unspoken concerns. At last, Virgil spoke. "We've no policy against a teacher marrying. So long as your work holds Miss Bell, you'll have no trouble from us." Relief swept Josie. "Thank you. I promise my dedication to the children will not falter." Doc Whitlock's expression remained cautious. "You know, some folks in town won't approve." Rafe's jaw tightened. "I'm well aware. Josie and I have talked it through." Josie squeezed his hand and met their eyes with quiet fire. "I love this man. I'll stand beside him proud and unashamed. Anyone who doesn't like it can keep their opinions to themselves." A rare smile tugged at Clara's lips. "Well said. I think you'll do just fine here." She offered her hand. "Congratulations." With the board's blessing, the real trial began facing the wider town. Pearl Fenwick hosted a small supper at the ranch the next week, inviting the hands and a few trusted neighbors. Josie was deeply moved by the warmth of the men who worked Rafe's land, and especially by Red Elk and his boy. Teacher Mary Boss. Little Crow asked bluntly during the meal, eyes wide. "Does that mean you'll be my teacher forever?" Josie hugged him quickly. That's the plan, little crow. But kindness was not universal. At school, Josie caught whispers between mothers, and in the mercantile conversation stopped cold when she entered. Jessie Doyle, sharp-tongued and sullen, muttered sly remarks about Indians in class, until Josie cooled his fire with an essay assignment on the contributions of native tribes. The sharpest opposition came from Hank Doyle himself. One afternoon, Josie left the schoolhouse in time to hear his voice carry across the street. "So it's true you're marrying the school marm." His tone dripped contempt. "Pretty gal. Shame she's settling for a half-breed when there are real men in this town." Rafe's reply was steel wrapped in calm. "Best keep those thoughts to yourself, Doyle, and stay away from my fiancé." "Or what?" Hank sneered. "You'll sick your Shoshone kin on me. Those days are over, Harlan." Josie crossed the street, fury sparking her steps. "Mr. Doyle," she said coolly, "I heard you plain." He turned, taken aback. "Miss Bell, I want to be very clear," she said, steady as stone. "I am not settling. I am marrying the finest man I have ever known, a man with honor, intelligence, and compassion, qualities you'd do well to learn yourself." Color darkened Doyle's face. "You don't know what you're talking about, girl. You're new here." "You don't understand, I understand plenty." Josie cut him off. "I know prejudice when I see it," Josie Bell said, her tone cutting like a blade, "and I find it beneath contempt." She slipped her hand through Rafe Harlan's arm and inclined her head coldly. "Good day, Mr. Doyle." As they walked away, Rafe murmured low, "That was either mighty brave or downright reckless." Perhaps both. Josie admitted her boldness draining now that the moment had passed. "But I couldn't stand silent and let him speak of you like that." His look held both pride and unease. "Hank Doyle is a dangerous man. He's got half this town in his pocket through debts and investments." "Does that include the school?" Josie asked. "No," Rafe answered. "The school belongs to the people." "Then his opinion means little to me," she said firmly, though she well understood the storm they might have stirred. In spite of the shadows cast by Doyle and his kind, the weeks before their wedding brimmed with happiness. Josie poured herself into her teaching, her dedication, slowly winning over even the most doubtful parents. Rafe came to town often, courting her proper, in full view, walking her home from the schoolhouse, sharing supper at the hotel, or riding with her on Sundays. At the ranch, under Pearl Fenwick's watchful but kindly eye, Josie and Rafe dreamed aloud of their future. They spoke of which corner of the cabin might hold Josie's shelves of books, how they'd enlarge the garden, and whether one day they might add a second story for children. "You want children, Josie?" Rafe asked one evening, as the sun bled into the horizon. Her smile was soft, wistful. "Yes, very much. A boy with your eyes, or a little girl with your strength?" His arm drew her close. "More than I ever knew I wanted, yes. A house full if you'll have it. This land ought to ring with children's laughter." "How many is a house full?" she teased. 4, maybe 5, he grinned. "Enough to keep us building bigger." The vision filled her heart until it nearly burst in. This wasn't just a marriage, it was the building of a home, a life rich with love and promise. But 2 weeks before the wedding, calamity struck. One morning, Josie found the schoolhouse door ajar. Inside was ruin books, strewn desks, toppled and scrawled across the blackboard in harsh white chalk. "No breed lovers." Her hands shook as she locked the door before any child could see. She ran straight to the sheriff. Marshal Granger's face hardened as he surveyed the wreck. "Likely drifters or drunk miners," he muttered, though his eyes lingered on the message. Rafe arrived soon after, fury barely contained beneath his calm. "This reeks of Doyle's doing, or at least his blessing." "You can't prove it," Granger warned. "He'd deny it quick enough." "What do we do?" Josie asked, her throat tight with rage and grief. The school was her sanctuary, and now it had been defiled. Rafe put an arm firmly around her shoulders. "We clean it up, and we carry on. They don't get to win." By noon, with parents and older students rallying to her side, the school was righted again. Rafe posted a hand to sleep there nights until things calmed. And from the ashes of that cruelty, something unexpected grew. Folks who had been wary or silent now stood with them. Clara Mita organized new curtains. Doc Whitlock donated books from his own shelves. Reverend Latham thundered against cowardly sins of prejudice in his Sunday sermon. "People surprise you," Josie said afterward, walking arm in arm with Rafe, no longer hiding what they were. "Given time, most hearts lean toward decency." "Some do," Rafe agreed, though his eyes still carried the weight of caution. She stopped, turning to face him square. "I'd rather endure hardship with you than live in easy comfort without you. Don't ever doubt that." His eyes softened. He lifted her gloved hand and kissed it gently. "2 more weeks," he whispered. "Then you'll be Mrs. Harlan?" "I can't wait." The day finally came. A clear November morning, crisp with the promise of winter, yet gilded with autumn's colors. Josie dressed in the teacher's cottage, helped by Pearl Fenwick and Clara Mita, who had surprised her by becoming a trusted friend. The dress, ordered from a catalog and altered by the town seamstress, was simple ivory satin, trimmed with lace. She wore her mother's pearl earrings, and on her hair lay a crown of late-blooming wildflowers Rafe had gathered himself. "You're radiant," my dear Pearl whispered, dabbing her eyes. "Rafe won't know what hit him," Clara said with a rare grin. The ceremony was set at the ranch, not the church. Rafe wanted to honor his mother's kin, who would feel out of place inside stained-glass walls, and he wanted their union to stand as a bridge between 2 worlds. Josie rode in a flower-trimmed wagon. Red elk at the reins. Her heart thundered as they crested the hill, and she saw the place transformed, ribbons and wildflowers twined through branches, blankets spread bright with color, and rows of wooden benches curving around the creekside clearing. Nearly 100 guests filled the seats, townsfolk on one side, Shoshone kin on the other. And at the center stood Rafe, proud and tall, in a black suit, his hair tied back with a beaded leather cord. Beside Rafe, Harlan stood Iron Bear, his Shoshone uncle, and Reverend Latham, their presence a living bridge between 2 worlds. Red Elk helped Josie Bell down from the wagon, and a hush fell over the crowd as she began her walk toward her groom. Rafe's gaze on her was everything she could have wished for, wonder, pride, and love blazing in his eyes. The ceremony wove traditions together seamlessly. Reverend Latham spoke of devotion and steadfast partnership, while Iron Bear gave blessings in his native tongue and bound their joined hands with a beaded leather cord, the colors glinting in the sunlight. "I take you, Josie Bell, as my wife." Rafe vowed, voice steady as stone. "I swear to walk beside you through every season, to honor your wisdom and courage, to guard your heart as my greatest treasure, and to love you until the stars themselves fade." Tears blurred Josie's vision as she answered, "I take you, Rafe Harlan, as my husband. I promise to stand with you against every storm, to honor your heritage as my own, to nurture the family we'll build, and to love you with every breath until time itself ends." They exchanged rings, Rafe, receiving a gold band that once belonged to Henry Quinn, Josie's father, while Josie accepted a second ring of Shoshone design to sit beside her sapphire. "By the authority vested in me," Reverend Latham declared, and with the blessings of the ancestors, Iron Bear intoned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Their kiss was met with cheers that rose from both townsfolk and Shoshone kin a union not only of two hearts, but of two worlds. The feast stretched long into the night. Tables held roast beef biscuits and cornbread alongside venison fry bread and native stews. Music rose from fiddles, guitars, and the steady beat of hand drums, a harmony of frontier and native sound. Children ran across the ranch yard, Josie's pupils among them, while grown folk danced, laughed, and told stories. Even small troubles couldn't dim the joy. Hank Doyle appeared at the far edge of the property only to leave after a quiet warning from Marshall Granger. Later, a sudden gust toppled a food tent, sending pies tumbling downhill to the delight of children and adults alike. As lanterns flickered in the dusk, Rafe led Josie down to the creek where their love had first taken root. He pulled her close. "Happy Mrs. Harlan?" he asked softly. "More than I ever thought possible," she whispered, tracing his cheek with her hand. "There were years I thought I'd die alone," he confessed, voice hushed. "Too Shoshone for the white world, too white for the Shoshone world." And now she urged gently. "Now I know exactly where I belong," he said simply. "Here with you, building a world of our own. Later alone, at last, in the cabin that was now truly theirs, they gave themselves to each other, fully, their love sealed in the quiet firelight." Lying against him afterward, Josie thought of the day she had collapsed in the mud, certain she would die forgotten. "What's on your mind?" Rafe murmured against her hair. "The day we met," she said softly. "How close I came to never finding you, never having this." His arms tightened. "My mother's people say spirits know each other. I believe that. No matter the path, Josie, I'd have found you." She smiled through her tears. "And I'd have made you promise the same as that day that I'd never be alone again." "A promise kept," he whispered, kissing her, as the November wind whistled against the cabin walls, carrying their future with it. Life as Mrs. Harlan proved both harder and sweeter than Josie imagined. The winter of 1876 to 77 tested them with blizzards so fierce she worried for her students, but Rafe assured her the town's children knew how to weather such trials. Come spring, with the land bursting in wildflowers and calves bawling in the pastures, Josie's duties stretched beyond the classroom. She kept ranch accounts, wrote letters to cattle buyers, and expanded the kitchen garden until it fed nearly the whole household. Slowly, the community of Redemption Creek came to judge them not by heritage, but by deeds. Rafe earned respect for his fair dealings and neighborly help. Josie for her tireless devotion to the school children. Even Hank Doyle grudgingly held his peace after Rafe helped save his prize bulls during a sudden flood. Old prejudices still lingered, but the open hostility softened, replaced by wary acceptance. As late summer rolled in, and the first anniversary of their meeting drew close, Josie Bell shared the news they had prayed for come spring they would be parents. Rafe Harlan's joy knew no bounds. His protective nature flared instantly. "I'll build a proper nursery," he declared, already sizing up the bedroom with his eyes. "And we'll bring in more help for the house. You won't be lifting a thing." Josie laughed, pressing his hand to her still flat stomach. "I'm with child. My love not running cattle on the open range." Still, she agreed to some help, and soon Savannah Rose Little Crow's 16-year-old sister came to live with them. She earned fair wages and received evening lessons from Josie, while providing companionship and light assistance during the long days when Rafe was working far out on the ranch. As her pregnancy advanced, Josie gradually stepped back from full-time teaching with Clara Mita, who had once been a school teacher herself, taking the older students several days a week. By February, with snow piled high and her belly round with new life, Josie's focus shifted to preparing for the child and sketching plans for the school year ahead. One night by the fire, Rafe traced the curve of her belly with reverent hands. "Think it's a boy or a girl?" A boy, Josie said with certainty. He never stops moving, kicking and rolling like a colt in spring. Rafe smiled. Girls can be wild spirits too. That they can, Josie agreed, picturing her spirited students. But whatever comes, this child will be loved beyond measure. Their son, healthy, loud-lunged, and strong, was born on a golden April morning almost exactly a year after Rafe had lifted Josie from the mud. They named him Henry James Harlan, after both their fathers Henry Quinn and Elias Boone. Doc Whitlock pronounced the boy hearty and sound. Rafe, who had worn a groove in the cabin floor, pacing during Josie's labor, finally took his son in trembling hands, tears falling unchecked. "Hello, little one," he whispered, voice breaking. "Welcome to the world." Josie, watching her husband cradle the child, felt her heart swell until it nearly burst. This was the family she had never dared to hope for, born from love that had risen out of the unlikeliest beginnings. "He's perfect," Rafe murmured, returning the baby to her arms. "Just like his mama. Hardly perfect." Josie laughed weakly, exhaustion tugging at her, but happier than I've ever been. The years that followed carried both trials and triumphs. 2 years later, Henry was joined by a sister, Sarah Elizabeth, and in 1881 by twins Robert and Rachel. Under Rafe's steady hand and Josie's sharp mind, the ranch thrived, expanding to orchards and a small dairy. Josie balanced her devotion to family with her love of teaching, keeping a reduced schedule that still shaped the children of Redemption Creek. The school's reputation for excellence grew under her guidance, drawing families from miles around. Together, they faced every storm, a fire in '79 that gutted part of the barn, a cruel drought in '82 that threatened the cattle, and the whispers of prejudice that resurfaced when their children started school. Yet each hardship only bound them tighter, their marriage tempered like steel in the forge. On their 10th anniversary, Rafe stunned Josie with a trip back to Boston, her first return since she'd left a decade before. They walked the public garden, strolled the harbor, and visited the old bookshops Josie had cherished as a girl. Their children's wide-eyed wonder at the bustling city filled her heart. "Do you ever regret it?" Rafe asked quietly one afternoon, as they walked the common, watching Henry race ahead with his siblings. "Leaving all this behind for the Wyoming territory." Josie squeezed his hand. "Not for a single moment. Boston was my past. You, our children, the ranch, that's my present and my future. That's where I belong." His smile was as tender and steady as it had been the day he first carried her from the mud, and whispered that she'd never be alone again, a promise he had kept through a decade of love and labor. That night, as they prepared to leave Boston, Josie stood at the hotel window, watching the strange city lights. Rafe came up behind her, his arms circling her waist, chin resting on her shoulder. "Penny, for your thoughts," he murmured. "I was thinking about journeys," she whispered, leaning back into him. "How the hardest ones often lead us exactly where we're meant to be." Rafe turned her in his arms, his green eyes still carrying that same unwavering love. "Then I'm grateful for every step of ours," he said softly. "Even the painful ones." "As am I," Josie breathed, rising on tiptoe to kiss him, the man who had lifted her not only from the mud, but into a life more beautiful than she had ever dreamed possible. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blazed the trail. Subscribe, share, leave your thoughts in the comments, and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you.